speaker for the day, speakers actually, but only speaker is here. Architect Nithya and Architect Kiran. Nithya is here. They will be presenting the 8th semester studio, which is the thesis studio.
Well, if we had the first semester and the subsequent semesters in that great depth, Vatsala, then the thesis would be a breeze. But it's not. We went through what's given in that syllabus, and it seems fine. Like what it says is probably how we go about it. But what actually happens is when we see the thesis of so many students who come into the office for training or who apply for work, I think we make it a point always to find out what their thesis topic was and see what it is. We find there's a lot of variation. There's some which has a lot of work. Thesis project representation shows you how dedicated or how hardworking that student is in just a minute. And we see there's a lot of difference, and it's almost like, okay, this person is in or out. You sort of, it's never like, oh, I'm not sure. And you know that person by looking at that thesis work, whether that person's going to work or how serious that person is, how involved or passionate, etc. that person is. So why do we see such a big variation? So maybe half the class has good thesis projects, but then what about the second half of the class whose thesis projects don't meet with probably what's expected? I think there are a good number of theses that just get passed, or and then the degrees that just get given and people move out. So we're trying to find out how to do something about this, and if there are any ways in which we can make sure that most of the theses meet at least a certain minimum standard of what is required. So the first step was to look at what a thesis meant, and it's not just the big architectural project at the end of the course. It's more about putting forth an idea and carrying it through, thinking it through. And so I think this whole idea about having, what is your thesis project? It's a hotel, it's a hospital, it's an airport. I think there's got to be plus something else to it, what idea it is that we're trying to explore through that project, what the thesis is, not just what the project is. Help the student accomplish that in all the 14 weeks that they have, to show that, to get an end project which is actually, which makes that student proud of showing it as the culmination of the undergraduate education. So for this, we were looking at what is needed is a lot of work that also happens before the actual thesis semester, which is easily explained here in a line, that all this is done in the previous semester, but I think figuring out how that actually can be realized. I'm not sure if the initial part of the thesis semester itself is spent in probably figuring out exactly the project, the site, the guide, etc. And though it says here that they should happen before the thesis semester. Also, I think if they have the requirements made clear to them in terms of the report as well as drawings, models, etc., what is required. And also have explained to them that the thesis is a way of, we are not looking for a final, most evolved end product, but the whole process, how it's important, and to explore how it's important to document that, represent that at different stages in the jury and so on. For this, again, similar to what Vatsala was just mentioning about in the first semester, I think we need to have something like a preparation, thesis prep talks, by both faculty and other invited people who are associated with the thesis, either as jurors or guides, etc., telling them what's a thesis, because otherwise I think we do come to it with like the final big architectural project idea in our heads. Yes, how do we go about finishing all the pre-project information, whether the topic meets the approval of the institute? You know, there's this whole thing about research topics, live projects, fictitious projects, etc. Whatever it is needs to be expressed and approved and move on. So I think it's not a question of deciding whether that is allowed or not, but actually how do we help the student choose that and work on it and move to put in work of considerable intensity during the thesis semester. Yes, and topics should preferably draw from the strengths of the faculty who are guiding these, you know, whether they're thesis coordinators, visiting or guides from outside the college, etc. But I think there are some students who probably are looking at a topic for which they don't have local support, and I think how do you address that issue? They are probably relying on internet and downloads, and they don't. So it's kind of hangs in there, not fully developed. Neither is it abandoned. I think what needs to be done in such a case has got to be decided right in the beginning. I also think we spend a lot of time, I see thesis reports, I hear there's so much time talked about what all case studies, literature studies, data that can be collected off the net so quickly, but I think that maybe because we are asking for that to be presented, the whole thesis report is most of that, and then there's no project in it. What happened at the end is not there. So these things I think have to be told that they happen continuously, and that's not happening in the first 2 weeks and then, or the first 8 weeks and then nothing much after that. So how to work with that, how important that is, where is its place, has to be explained to them. I think another important thing is for a student to write out a statement of intent, a short 1 or 2 page paper of really what they hope to do through this thesis, what they hope to accomplish or to explore and figure out and see while doing that project. That is the intent of the thesis, and that is the intent of this whole semester's work, not the design of a hospital, design of an ABC, but what they are going to explore. What would they like to figure out, how to preserve some, or how historical background, anything. So that I'm calling idea exploration. You can call it the thesis idea or whatever you call it. It's got to be a critical inquiry into a topic, into a subject that can be related to architecture, or maybe not directly related, can be related to like geometry or history or any other thing. It can be a fairly simple thing. It need not be like philosophical and really out of average students' reach, perhaps. It can be, yes, so it could also be typically like sustainability, modular, anything, typology, climatology, and how to work with that as the thesis idea. In terms of the way the process, the way it's carried out, we have currently this whole thing about initial concept, mid-term review, and then the final jury. I think what's important is a more continuous and more frequent evaluation and interaction. as someone was saying, perhaps every interaction, they don't come to the studio for the contact hours are not actually meant for the working hours. They are the hours where there'll be crits. So it's either they're pinned up and it's an open discussion on that, or it's a one-to-one discussion. I've frequently seen that after, when this discussion is over, the rest of the when the one-to-one discussion is over, the rest of the time either the student doesn't feel the need to be there because their bit is over, or they're not there very often if they don't have anything significant, substantial to show. Whereas I think it has to be planned, and every interaction's got to be either a discussion or a pin-up or a desk crit or something of that sort. So I think the statement of the areas of research and the precedent study, etc., has to be done very fast, maybe in the 1 to 2 weeks, in the initial 1 to 2 weeks, and expressed and assessed and moved on, or in the semester before this thesis project happens. There has to be more interim reviews. So maybe the initial, what happens is, what I've seen also in some of the things is, we don't see anything happening, and when we're very close to the final, there's like a whole lot of very preliminary stage drawings happening. And so even at the end of the term, there are very basic issues of circulation, ventilation, etc., which aren't resolved. So we have to maybe have these ideas, start thinking about it and getting them out in single line drawings, concept sketches, anything in the first, at a very early stage, assuring them that there will be time to change, and it will go through a lot of change over the weeks. Have a second, I see in this syllabus also that the study model is required at the final review, but there is no intermediate step where a study model is required. The final review calls for a study model as well as the final presentation model. We probably got to have intermediate interim reviews with the models and sketches, and significant design development with certain ideas of services, not just a resolution of which is where. And then the last 4 or how many ever weeks are left in the semester for the final presentation, which I am assuming that mostly at that time we don't get to see them. They're away somewhere, they're working by themselves. There isn't much interaction. I'm not sure if that's how it is everywhere, but this has been my experience. The submission of what needs to be given for the final thesis jury. The format right now, I see typically these thesis reports are a big fat book which doesn't have the project but has so much of case studies, data analysis, literature study, etc. I think it's time to revamp that, have a limit on the number of pages. It's a short booklet, not like a huge book. It's probably a portfolio, maybe A3 format. Have, yes, the requirements of cover page, table of contents, and the references index, etc. But the study is limited, say, to a certain number, 6 or 8 pages. The thesis stuff to a few more pages, and then have the drawing and models, etc. In short, it should be like a thesis portfolio that can be submitted on a CD also, if permitted. And this is what happens in the prep, in the thesis prep, when I don't know if people look at the reports of other previous students and what really they get from it. What is it that they get from it that that's not already available on the internet? It's just copied and pasted, cut and paste numerous times. I also have something to say about the marking scheme. It says 300 for the Viva and 200 for the progressive evaluation, so totaling 500 marks, which I think again adds to the thing where you don't see anything happening for a large part of the semester, and then in the end, boom, there are so many sheets and drawings that come up to. It probably would be good to have a progressive evaluation having greater, having the bigger 300 marks than the final one. And I think even that has to be further split up into, say in the first, give only 50 or a smaller part of it for the initial study bit. Then, so that they know that as they are working consistently, they are also working towards getting more marks. In the first interim review is probably 100 marks, the next one is 150, and then the final goes on to 200. That's all my ideas about the thesis.